She didn't scream when she saw it. That's the part that never leaves her. It's the part she comes back to, years later, sitting in a lit room with the curtains drawn and the doors locked, trying to make sense of what her eyes showed her on that trail. She'd hiked it before, dozens of times. She knew every bend, every route, every place where the canopy thinned and you could see the ridge above. But that evening, something knew her too. Standing at the tree line, just beyond the reach of the last gray light, something stood on two legs, too tall, shoulders too wide, head tilted at an angle that made her stomach drop before her brain even registered why. And then it turned toward her, and she recognized the face. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She stood completely still on that trail in the cold Appalachian dusk, and she watched it watch her until the dark took it back. She hasn't returned to those mountains since. And tonight, you're going to understand why. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, you found us at exactly the right time. What we do here is simple. We go looking for the stories that don't make the news, the accounts that get filed away, laughed off, quietly forgotten by everyone except the person who lived them. The ones that get told in low voices at the end of the night when the fire's dying and there's nobody left who might overhear. Tonight we're going into the Appalachian Mountains, and I want you to understand something before we begin. The Appalachians are not like other wild places. They are not simply remote. They are not simply old. They are something else entirely. The range stretches nearly 2,000 miles along the eastern edge of this continent. Parts of it have been continuously forested for over 300 million years. The valleys between these ridges were carved by geological forces that predate almost every living thing on this planet. The Cherokee called portions of this range the place of the blue smoke. Early European settlers wrote home about the mountains with a reverence that was difficult to distinguish from fear. Even today, locals who have spent their entire lives in these hollows and on these ridges will lower their voices when certain subjects come up. They will look at you a certain way, and they will say things like, "You stay on the trail. You don't call back to something you don't recognize. You don't go out after the sounds stop." Tonight, 3 people ignored that kind of wisdom. These are their accounts. Every detail is exactly as it was reported. Nothing has been embellished. It doesn't need to be. Story 1. The Visitor at Milepost 9. It was the 3rd week of October, 2019. A man named Daniel had been section hiking the Appalachian Trail for the better part of 2 years, completing stretches whenever his schedule allowed. He was not a novice. He had logged hundreds of miles across multiple states, had camped alone in rain and cold, and had navigated his way out of situations that would have broken less experienced hikers. He was not someone who spooked easily. He set up camp just beyond Milepost 9 in western North Carolina as the last light left the sky. The site was good. Level ground, clear access to water, nothing unusual. He built a small fire, ate, and sat for a while listening to the mountains settle into night the way experienced solo hikers do, not fighting the solitude, but leaning into it. The sounds were normal at first. Wind through old canopy, the creek below his ridge. The occasional distant call of something nocturnal beginning its night. Normal sounds. The sounds of a mountain that is alive and breathing and completely indifferent to the small human sitting at its edge with a fire. Then, sometime around 10 in the evening, the sounds stopped. Not gradually. Not the way sounds fade when a storm front rolls in or when a large animal moves through and everything goes quiet for a moment. They stopped the way a recording stops. One moment there was a full layered curtain of natural sound, and the next moment, nothing. Daniel described it in a hiking forum post the following week. He said it felt like pressure, like the mountain had drawn in a breath and simply held it. He sat perfectly still. He did not reach for his flashlight. Some instinct he didn't fully understand told him not to move, not to illuminate himself, not to announce his exact position. He waited. For nearly 4 minutes, by his watch, there was no sound at all. Then the footsteps began. He was precise about this in his account. They were not the random movement of an animal navigating underbrush at night. They were not the heavy, shambling circuit of a bear drawn in by the smell of food. These were deliberate footsteps, bipedal, slow, moving in a wide arc around his campsite, staying just within the tree line, maintaining a consistent distance of perhaps 30 or 40 feet. Whatever it was circling him. He called out. His voice came out steadier than he expected, he said. He asked if someone was there, if someone needed help. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, after a moment that he described as the longest of his life, it spoke. He has tried many times to describe what he heard. He has never found the right words. The closest he ever came was this. It sounded like his name. Not his name spoken clearly, the way another person would say it. More like an attempt. Like something that had heard his name used once, at a great distance, and was now trying to produce that sound with the wrong kind of mouth, the wrong kind of throat. It was close enough to recognize. It was wrong enough to make his blood go cold. He did not respond. He sat with his knife open in his hand until the sky began to lighten at 6:47 the following morning. He does not believe he slept at any point during that night. He is not certain he blinked. When full daylight came, he walked the perimeter of his campsite. 30 feet into the tree line, in the soft soil along the creek bank, he found prints. The first few were human, bare feet, adult-sized, walking slowly. By the fourth step, the shape had changed. The proportions were no longer right. The toes were wrong. The pressure points were wrong. Whatever had been walking upright had shifted as it moved, as though two different things were sharing the same set of tracks. He photographed them. He packed his camp in under 15 minutes. He never completed that section of trail. When asked later if he reported what he found, he said he did. A ranger station. A phone call. A conversation that ended with him being told that unusual animal encounters were common in that stretch of trail and that he should make sure to store his food properly. He hasn't been back. He also said one more thing at the end of his forum post, almost as an afterthought. He said that for 3 nights after he came home, he heard something outside his apartment window, on the 4th floor, circling. Story 2. The Woman in the Yellow Raincoat. The second account comes from a couple, Marcus and Teresa. They've asked that their last name not be used, and after hearing what they experienced, that request seems entirely reasonable. It was November of 2021. They were driving a back route through the mountain roads of eastern Tennessee, heading toward a cabin rental after a long day on the road. It was late afternoon, but the light had already gone flat and gray the way it does in the mountains in late autumn, a heavy, sunless gray that makes 4 o'clock feel like 8. The road was narrow, 2 lanes, old asphalt with frost heaves and no shoulder to speak of. They hadn't passed another car in over 20 minutes. Teresa was watching the tree line. She said later that she'd been doing it without realizing it. There was something about the forest on that particular stretch of road that held her attention in a way she couldn't explain. The trees were close, dense, old, the kind of forest that doesn't let much light reach the floor even in summer. And in November, with the leaves down, it was a wall of dark trunks and shadow that seemed to lean slightly toward the road. She was still looking at it when Marcus slowed the car. There was a woman standing on the shoulder. Yellow raincoat, dark trousers, no bag, no car visible, no house, no driveway, no mailbox. Just a woman standing on the edge of a mountain road in the fading light, facing away from them, looking into the tree line. Marcus pulled alongside her and lowered his window. Cool air came in, the smell of coming rain and dead leaves. "You need help?" The woman turned around slowly. Teresa said it wasn't the face that frightened her. The face was ordinary. An older woman, perhaps late 50s or early 60s. Pale eyes, wet gray hair, high cheekbones. She looked at Marcus first, then at Teresa, with an expression that was not distressed, not confused, not grateful. It was patient, like someone who had been waiting for a specific car to come down this road, like someone who knew it would. She smiled, and she said nothing. Marcus asked again, were they close to the town they were heading to? Did she need a ride somewhere? Was she all right? She raised her right hand slowly and pointed. not at them, not at the road ahead, behind them, back the way they'd come, back toward the valley they'd been climbing away from for the last 45 minutes. Then she lowered her hand, turned back to the tree line, and walked into it. Not through a gap, not along a trail, straight into dense brush and standing timber, without hesitation, without slowing, without a sound. In 10 steps, she was gone. Marcus and Teresa sat in the idling car without speaking for what Teresa estimates was nearly a full minute. Then she picked up her phone. 1 bar of service, a missed call from her mother, timestamped 40 minutes earlier when they were still in the valley. She called back. Her mother picked up before the second ring. Her voice was tight. She'd been trying to reach them. She'd had a feeling, she used that word, feeling, and said she couldn't explain it better than that. A feeling that something was wrong, that they needed to turn around, that whatever road they were on, they needed to come back down. Marcus turned the car around. 18 minutes later, coming around a switchback they would have reached had they continued forward, they saw the tree. An old-growth oak, at least 4 feet across the trunk, had fallen directly across both lanes. No recent storm, no visible reason. It had simply come down across the only road forward, at a bend that would have given them no time to stop. At the speed they'd been traveling, it would have been unsurvivable. The county sheriff's department later confirmed the tree. They found no explanation for the fall. They found no record of any missing woman matching the description Teresa and Marcus provided. No local resident, no report filed, nothing. A ranger who worked that stretch of mountain road, when told the story informally by a friend of the family, was quiet for a moment. Then he said that stretch of road had a name among the people who'd worked it for a long time. He wouldn't say what the name was. He just said that some places in these mountains have been watching the roads since before the roads were there. And sometimes they warn you. Story 3. The cabin that was already occupied. The last account is the one I keep coming back to, not because it is the most dramatic, not because of the evidence or the details or even the ending. I keep coming back to it because of one specific moment, one detail that no matter how many times I turn it over, I cannot explain away. 4 friends rented a remote cabin in the mountains of West Virginia in the summer of 2018. A long weekend, the kind of rental that advertises itself as a digital detox. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors within earshot. A cabin that had been in the same family since the late 1800s, now rented out through a local property management company. Rustic but functional, a fireplace, a porch with a mountain view, a basement that the rental listing mentioned only in passing as storage. They were told not to use the basement. The reason given was mundane, structural concerns, old foundation, nothing alarming. They didn't think about it again. The first night was completely normal. The second night, at approximately 2 in the morning, the basement door opened. They were all awake within moments. The door had been latched. They were certain of this because one of them, a woman named Carol, had specifically checked it before they went to bed. She had a habit of checking doors and locks. She had checked it twice. The latch was old, they told themselves. The wood had swelled. Mountain humidity does strange things to old structures. They closed it, secured it with a chair wedged under the handle, went back to sleep. The third night they heard something moving below the floorboards, not scurrying, not the random movement of an animal that had found its way into a crawl space. This was slow, deliberate, the sound of weight shifting from one foot to the other, back and forth, rhythmic, the sound of pacing. Ray was the one who went to the basement door. He said in every retelling that he doesn't fully know why he opened it. Something about the sound was almost magnetic. He unhooked the chair, opened the door, and stood at the top of the stairs with a flashlight. The beam reached the far end of the basement. In the corner against the back wall, a rocking chair was moving. Slow, steady arcs, back and forth, no draft. Every window in the cabin was closed. There was no air movement that any of them could detect. No mechanism, no string, no rational explanation that any of them, even now, has been able to produce. Ray walked down the stairs, He crossed the basement floor. He stood in front of the rocking chair and watched it slow and stop. Then he reached out and pressed his palm flat against the seat. It was warm, not the ambient temperature of a room, not wood that had absorbed the heat of the house. Warm the way a chair is warm when someone has been sitting in it for a long time and has only just stood up. They left within 30 minutes. All four of them. They didn't finish packing. They left food on the counter and beds unmade and drove down the mountain in the dark without speaking. When they contacted the rental company the following week, the property manager listened to what they described without interrupting. When they finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she told them they were the fourth group that year to leave before their stay was complete. She told them that the cabin had been built in 1887 by a man who had come into these mountains alone and had never, in all recorded history of the property, willingly left. She told them that the rocking chair had been his. And she told them very quietly that in all the years the property had been managed and rented, no one had ever gone to the basement. And no one had ever come back up to say it was empty. The Appalachians keep their secrets the way mountains keep everything. Slowly, completely, without apology. The people who have lived in these hollows for generations don't talk about the mountains the way tourists do. They don't romanticize them. They don't reduce them to scenery. They live alongside something they understand, on a deep and unspoken level, to be far older and far stranger than anything they will encounter in their lifetimes. They stay on the trails. They don't call back to things they don't recognize. They don't go into the basement. And when the sounds stop in the middle of the night, they stay very, very still. These mountains were here before the first human footstep. They will be here long after the last. And somewhere in the 300 million years between those 2 points, something settled into these ridges and valleys and decided to stay. Something that has had a very long time to learn the roads, to learn the trails, to learn the sound of your name. If you've been to these mountains, you already know the feeling I'm describing. That moment where the air changes and the sounds drop away and the back of your neck goes cold for no reason you can name. That's not your imagination. That's the mountain noticing you. Stay safe out there. Subscribe if these stories found something in you tonight. Ring the bell. We go deeper every single week, and leave a comment below if you have a story of your own. Because the one thing I've learned in doing this is that there are far more of you than you realize. And you've all felt it, that feeling that you were not quite alone.